Girl was walking her dog at night, but the barking led her to an unexpected situation. Emily Johnson walked through Liberty Square as she did every night after studying at the college library. At 22, she had kept this routine for 3 years, always accompanied by Duke, her loyal four-legged companion her family had adopted when she was still a child. The golden-haired dog suddenly stopped and began barking desperately toward a bench near the fountain. Emily tugged on the leash, trying to calm him, but Duke refused to move forward. That's when she noticed a lone figure sitting on the bench, an elderly woman with grey hair silently crying while clutching something to her chest. "Duke, stop that," whispered Emily, embarrassed by the barks echoing through the empty square. But the dog wouldn't obey. Instead, he pulled harder on the leash, as if something invisible was calling him toward that unknown woman. The young woman hesitated for a moment. Her father had always warned her about the dangers of approaching strangers, especially at night. But there was something about the woman's posture that stirred her compassion. Maybe it was the way she hunched over what she held, or the muffled sobs that reached Emily's ears. She decided to approach slowly, keeping Duke close. "Excuse me, Mum. My dog is very agitated. Are you okay?" The woman slowly lifted her face. She was about 65, with brown eyes swollen from crying and wrinkles that told stories of a lifetime. When her eyes met Emily's, something strange happened. The woman's eyes widened, as if she'd seen a ghost. "My God, it can't be," she murmured, pressing a hand to her chest. "Ma'am, are you feeling unwell?" Emily knelt beside the bench, concerned. The woman stared intently at the young girl's face, her hands visibly trembling. The object she had been clutching fell to the ground. It was an old photograph, yellowed with time. "Hannah, my Hannah," the woman whispered before fainting. Emily shouted for help while cradling the woman's head to keep it from hitting the bench. Duke had stopped barking and was now sniffing intensely at the purse the woman had dropped, its contents scattered on the ground. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. A young man passing by on a bike stopped to help, and together they called an ambulance. While waiting, Emily gathered the woman's belongings. Among them she found medical papers, prescriptions and, to her surprise, more old photographs of a child who bore a striking resemblance to her younger self. "Look at this," said the cyclist, pointing to one of the documents. "She has serious kidney problems. These are medical reports." Emily examined the papers more closely. The woman's name was Beatrice Miller Thompson, and according to the reports, she urgently needed a kidney transplant. There was also a list of compatibility tests that seemed to have yielded no positive results. When the ambulance arrived, Emily insisted on accompanying Beatrice to the hospital. Something inside her couldn't just walk away and forget what had happened. During the ride, she studied the serene face of the unconscious woman and couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen her before. At the hospital, the on-duty doctor, Dr. Robert Mitchell, a middle-aged man with graying hair, examined Beatrice and stabilized her. When she woke, her first words were directed at Emily. You stayed here with me?" "Yes, ma'am. I couldn't leave you alone. How are you feeling?" Beatrice watched her with an unsettling intensity, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "What's your name, child?" "Emily Johnson." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears again. "Johnson? What a cruel twist of fate." Dr. Mitchell interrupted the conversation to explain Beatrice's medical condition. She was in critical condition and needed a kidney transplant as soon as possible. Her family had been tested, but no relatives were a match. "Do you have any children?" Emily asked. "I had a daughter," Beatrice replied, her voice trembling. "But I lost her long ago." Something in the woman's tone made Emily's chest tighten. There was deep pain in those words, a wound that had never healed. Dr. Mitchell suggested Beatrice stay overnight at the hospital for observation. Emily offered to stay with her, but the nurse said only family members could remain. "She's my granddaughter," Beatrice lied, surprising everyone. Emily looked at her, confused, but something in the woman's pleading gaze kept her from contradicting the lie. When they were alone, Beatrice gripped Emily's hand tightly. "Why did you say I'm your granddaughter?" Because you remind me so much of her, my daughter." "What was her name?" "Hannah. Hannah Johnson." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. Johnson was a common last name, but still. "You said you lost her. What happened?" Beatrice closed her eyes as if gathering strength to tell a painful story. "Hannah was born 22 years ago. She was the most precious thing in my life. But when she was just 2 months old," the woman's voice broke. Emily waited patiently. "I was going through a very difficult time. Her father left me when he found out I was pregnant. I had no money, no support. I was desperate." "What happened to her?" "One day when I went out to work, I left Hannah with a neighbor. When I came back, she was gone." Emily's heart raced. "Gone how?" "The neighbor said a woman had come by claiming to be a social worker, that she was there to take the baby due to reports of neglect. But when I looked into it, I found no official report had ever been filed." "And you never found her?" "Never. I searched for years, spent everything I had on detectives, newspaper ads, posters. Hannah just vanished." Tears streamed freely down Beatrice's face. Emily felt a mix of compassion and something else, something she couldn't quite name. "And all this time you've been going to that square?" "For 20 years, every night. Always hoping, always believing she'd come home one day." Emily swallowed hard. 20 years ago, she was 2 years old, and she had been adopted when she was 2. "Mrs. Beatrice, do you remember any details about Hannah? Anything specific?" "She had a small birthmark here on her neck." Beatrice pointed to the left side. "And her eyes. Her eyes were just like yours." Emily instinctively touched her neck, her fingers brushing the exact spot where a small birthmark lay. Her world began to spin. You're sure about the date?" "I remember everything about my daughter. She was born on March 15th, 2003, at 3 in the morning. She weighed 2 pounds, 9 ounces. She had beautiful hair and only cried when she was hungry." Emily fell silent. March 15th, 2003 was her birthday. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The young woman stood abruptly, her heart pounding wildly. I need to go. My family must be worried." "Emily, wait." Beatrice tried to sit up in bed. "There's something you're not telling me, isn't there?" "No, ma'am, it's very late." But when Emily reached the door, Duke, who had been quiet until then, started barking again. She turned and saw the dog running toward Beatrice, who smiled through her tears. "Duke," the woman whispered. "Is that you, my Duke?" The dog jumped onto the hospital bed and began licking Beatrice's face, his tail wagging wildly. "How do you know my dog?" "Duke was the last gift I gave to Hannah. He was just a puppy when—" Emily leaned against the wall, her legs weak. Everything was starting to make sense in a terrifying way. "Are you saying Duke?" "I bought Duke from a breeder near the city. He was 2 months old, the same age as Hannah when she disappeared. I left him with her that day." The young woman looked at her dog, now completely calm and curled up beside Beatrice, as if he had never left. "But that's impossible. Duke has been with me since I was little. My parents adopted him when I was 2, said they found him abandoned." Beatrice and Emily stared at each other in silence, both reaching the same horrifying conclusion. "Emily," Beatrice said, her voice trembling, "were you adopted?" The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Emily nodded slowly. "How old were you?" 2. "What year?" 2005. "Where?" "Right here in Chicago." The silence that followed was too heavy to bear. Beatrice reached out to Emily. "Let me see your birthmark." With shaky hands, Emily pushed her hair aside, revealing her neck. Beatrice let out a muffled cry. "Hannah, my Hannah." The young woman stepped back, frightened by the intensity of her reaction. "No, ma'am. This must be a coincidence. My parents adopted me legally." They have all the paperwork. What kind of paperwork? I've never seen it, but they always said everything was done properly. Beatrice gripped the young woman's hand firmly. Emily, do you remember anything from before you were 2? The question hit a nerve. In truth, Emily had never understood why she had no memories before that age. Her parents had always said it was normal that young children don't remember anything. No, I don't remember anything. And your parents? How did they explain your adoption? They said they found me abandoned in an orphanage, that my birth mother left me there because she couldn't take care of me. Lies, Beatrice whispered. I never abandoned my daughter. She was taken from me. Emily began to panic. Everything she believed about her life was being questioned. You must be confused because of the medication. This is all just a coincidence. Then explain why Duke reacted like that when he saw me. Why he brought you to me. Emily had no answer. In truth, Duke had always been a special dog. He seemed to understand her feelings better than anyone and had always shown unusual intelligence. I need to go home, she said finally. I need to talk to my parents. Emily, please stay a little longer. Let me tell you more about Hannah, about you. I'm not Hannah. My name is Emily Johnson. Johnson was my married name. Hannah's father was Charles Thompson. Another impossible coincidence. Emily felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. I have to go, she repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. Beatrice opened the drawer beside the bed and took out a small leather pouch. Before you go, I want to show you something. She pulled out a small gold ring with a tiny blue stone in the center. This ring belonged to my mother, and before her, my grandmother. I put it on Hannah's little finger the day she was born. It was the only valuable possession I had to give to my daughter. Emily looked at the ring and felt dizzy. She knew that ring, or rather, she remembered it from somewhere deep in her memory. Where did you get this? I never got rid of it. It was all I had left of Hannah. But I remember this ring. The words slipped out before Emily could stop herself. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, you remember? I have a very vague memory of a woman putting a ring just like this on my finger. But I thought it was just a dream. What woman? I don't remember her face. I only remember gentle hands and a soft voice singing a song. What song? Emily closed her eyes, trying to piece together the fragmented memory. Something about a star shining in the sky. Beatrice began to sing softly. Shine, shine, my star, in the blue sky of the heart. My most beautiful star, it's you, my passion. Emily opened her eyes, tears streaming uncontrollably. How do you know that song? Because I made it up for my daughter. I sang it to Hannah every night before she went to sleep. The young woman sank heavily into the chair beside the bed. Her world had turned upside down in a matter of hours. This can't be happening. Emily, I know it's hard to accept, but all the signs point to the same conclusion. What if you're wrong? What if it's just a series of coincidences? Then we'll do a DNA test. But I'm certain, my child, I would recognize you anywhere. The word daughter echoed in Emily's heart, like a familiar song she had forgotten, but her body still remembered. I need to talk to my parents first. Of course, my dear. But will you come back tomorrow? Emily looked at Duke, who now slept peacefully beside Beatrice, more relaxed than she had ever seen him. I'll come back. The promise slipped from her lips as if part of her already knew her decision. Leaving the hospital, Emily called home. Her adoptive mother, Margaret Johnson, answered on the second ring. Sweetheart, where are you? It's past midnight. Mom, I'm at the hospital. What happened? Are you hurt? No, Mom, I'm fine. But I need to talk to you. It's important. Come home now. Your father and I are worried. During the taxi ride home, Emily tried to gather her thoughts. How could she question 20 years of life, 20 years of love and care from the parents who raised her? The house she grew up in was in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago. Margaret and Michael Johnson were simple, hard-working people who had always given her love and opportunities. Michael worked as an accountant, and Margaret was a retired teacher. They were the only parents Emily had ever known. When she arrived, she found them waiting in the living room, clearly anxious. "Emily, thank goodness," said Margaret, hugging her. "What happened? Where's Duke?" "He's at the hospital with a woman I met." Michael, a calm man of 58, stepped closer. "A woman? What's this about?" Emily sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and recounted everything that had happened since Duke started barking in the square. When she finished, her parents were pale. "Sweetheart," Margaret said, her voice trembling, "you can't believe this crazy story." "Why not, Mom?" Because you're our daughter. We adopted you legally." "Show me the papers." Michael and Margaret exchanged a glance Emily didn't miss. "The papers are stored away. We won't upset you with this now." "Dad, I need to see those documents." "Why?" Margaret's voice was strained. "Don't you trust us?" "It's not that, Mom, but there have been too many coincidences today. And Duke, you saw how he reacted." "Duke is just a dog," said Michael, sharper than usual. "A dog you said you found abandoned right when you adopted me." Another exchanged glance between his parents. "Emily," said Margaret, sitting beside her daughter, "we love you more than anything in this world. You are our life." "I know that, Mom, and I love you too, but I need to understand what happened." Michael took a deep breath. "All right, I'll get the documents." He went upstairs, leaving Emily alone with Margaret, who was quietly crying. "Mom, why are you reacting like this? If the adoption was legal, what's the problem?" It's complicated, sweetheart." "Complicated how?" Margaret didn't answer. Michael returned with a folder of documents, but hesitated before handing it over. "Before you see this, you need to understand one thing. We tried to have children for 10 years. I went through treatments, your father too. Nothing worked. When we gave up and decided to adopt, we were told the process could take years. And then a faster opportunity came up." Emily took the folder from her father and began examining the documents. There were certificates, forms, and several official signatures, but something caught her attention. "Why is my previous name scribbled out?" "It was just a temporary name," Michael replied quickly. "And why is there no information about my birth mother?" "Because she chose to remain anonymous." Emily was scanning the papers when she noticed a date that didn't make sense. "Dad, according to this document, you started the adoption process 3 months before I was born." Michael paled. "It must be a date error. And here it says I was 2 when I was adopted, but on the birth certificate you gave me, I was born in 2003. That would mean I was adopted in 2005, not 2004 like you always said." Margaret covered her face with her hands. "Emily, stop this." "Mum, why did you lie about the dates? Why are there so many inconsistencies?" Michael sank heavily into the armchair. Because maybe the adoption wasn't exactly how we told you." Emily's heart raced. "What do you mean, not exactly?" "We didn't do anything wrong," Margaret said defensively. "We just took an opportunity that came up." "What opportunity?" Michael took a deep breath. "A woman came to us saying she knew a child who needed a family. She said the birth mother was in a very difficult situation and wanted to give her daughter up for adoption, but wanted to avoid the official bureaucracy. And you agreed. We were desperate for a child, Emily. And when we saw you, you were so small, so helpless." "How did I come to you?" Margaret and Michael exchanged another uneasy glance. "The woman brought you to us," Margaret answered. "She said you were temporarily with a nanny, but that your mother wanted you to go to a good family." "And Duke?" "He came with you. The woman said he was your dog, and that you'd cry if you were separated." Emily felt sick. "Did you pay for me?" "We covered the legal expenses," Michael said quickly. "To make everything official." "How much?" "That doesn't matter now." "How much, Dad?" $15,000. The amount was significant for a middle-class family in 2005. Emily realized her parents had made a huge financial sacrifice. And you never questioned if it was all legal? We wanted to believe it was, Margaret whispered. And after a few years, when you were already our daughter in every way, it didn't matter anymore how you came to us. But it does matter, Mom, because if that woman at the hospital is right, you bought me from someone who stole me from my real mother. Don't say that, Margaret stood up, upset. We saved you. You were being neglected. How do you know that? The woman told us. She said your biological mother was a drug addict and couldn't take care of you. And you believed it without checking? When we saw you, it was clear you weren't being cared for, said Michael. You were so thin, wearing dirty clothes. Emily remembered Beatrice's words about going through financial difficulties at the time. Do you remember the name of the woman who facilitated the adoption? She introduced herself as a social worker, replied Margaret. Christine something. And you never saw her again? Never again. And you never tried to verify if her story was true? We didn't want to stir up a hornet's nest, admitted Michael. We were afraid you'd be taken from us. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The confession hung in the air like a sentence. Emily realized her parents had always known something was irregular about the adoption, but chose to ignore it because they desperately wanted a child. Do you know what this means? She said, her voice trembling. Do you realize there might be a woman who spent 20 years searching for the daughter who was stolen from her? We didn't know, Margaret protested. We thought you were being abandoned. But you never checked. You never did any research. You never questioned why a social worker was operating outside official channels. The silence that followed was heavy with guilt and regret. What will you do now? Asked Michael, his voice breaking. I'm going back to the hospital tomorrow. I'll take a DNA test. And if it confirms she's your biological mother, then you'll have to face the consequences of the choices you made 20 years ago. Emily went up to her room, leaving her parents in silence downstairs. She needed to process everything she'd uncovered. For 20 years, she'd believed a version of the story that now seemed full of holes and lies. Lying in bed, she looked at the photos on the wall, pictures of a happy childhood with Michael and Margaret. She couldn't deny they'd been loving, devoted parents, but that didn't justify what they might have done. The next morning, Emily woke up determined. She called the university to say she'd missed classes and headed to the hospital. She found Beatrice awake, talking to Dr. Mitchell about her medical condition. Duke was lying at the foot of the bed, clearly in his favorite spot. Emily, Beatrice exclaimed when she saw her. You came back. I promised I would, and I need to talk to you about some things. Dr. Mitchell discreetly stepped out after explaining that Beatrice's tests showed her kidney function had worsened. Did you speak to your parents? Beatrice asked. I did, and I found out things that confirm your suspicions. Emily shared everything she'd learned the night before. With each revelation, Beatrice's eyes filled with more tears. $15,000, Beatrice repeated bitterly. That was the price of my daughter. They didn't know it was wrong, or rather, they suspected, but chose to believe the version they wanted to hear. And now, what do you plan to do? I want to take the DNA test. I need absolute certainty. And if the test confirms it? Emily hesitated. That was the question that had haunted her since last night. I don't know. I love the parents who raised me, even knowing they made a mistake. But I also feel a connection to you that I can't explain. You don't have to choose between us, my dear. Love isn't a limited resource. But it's complicated. They're afraid of losing me. And they're right to be afraid, because now you know the truth. Dr. Mitchell returned with a lab technician. The DNA test was collected from both of them, and the results would be released in 48 hours. As they waited, Beatrice began sharing stories about the childhood she had planned for Hannah, the dreams she had nurtured, the plans she had made, the pain she had felt after the disappearance. I worked as a housekeeper back then, Beatrice shared. I earned very little, but I was saving every penny to give you a better life. I had secured a better job and was supposed to start the week after you went missing. Do you remember the neighbor who took care of me? Mrs. Rose, an elderly woman who lived in the same tenement as us. She was always very kind to me and to you. That's why I trusted her that day." "And what did she say about this Christine woman?" Mrs. Rose described a well-dressed, middle-aged woman who arrived with official papers, claiming there had been a report of neglect against me. She introduced herself as a social worker and said she needed to take you in for evaluation. And Mrs. Rose believed her? Rose was a simple woman who couldn't read well. When she saw the papers and heard the authority in the woman's voice, she thought she had no choice. "Did you try to find this Christine?" "I did, but it was as if she had never existed. No official institution knew anyone matching that description." The pieces of the puzzle were falling together in a disturbing way. Emily was beginning to understand that she had been the victim of a well-organized illegal adoption scheme. "Mrs. Beatrice, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course, my dear." "You said my biological father abandoned you. How did that happen?" Beatrice's face hardened. "Charles Thompson was an older married man. I was young and naive. I believed him when he said he would leave his wife for me. When I found out I was pregnant and told him, he disappeared as if he had never existed." "Did you try to look for him?" "I did, but I discovered he had lied about everything. The name he gave me was fake. The job he claimed to have was a lie. I had just been a fling to him." "Is that why you raised Hannah alone?" "That's why I decided to raise my daughter alone. And I was managing, despite all the hardships. Until..." Beatrice's voice broke again. Emily held her hand. "You weren't to blame for what happened. But I blame myself every day. If I had been more careful, if I hadn't trusted so easily. You did what any working mother would do. You had to work to support your daughter." At that moment, a nurse entered the room with news that would change everything. "Mrs. Beatrice," the lab called. "They managed to speed up the DNA test process. The results will be ready later today." The two women looked at each other, knowing that in the next few hours the whole truth would be revealed. "Emily," Beatrice said, "no matter the result, I want you to know these past 2 days have been the happiest I've had in 20 years. "Why?" "Because I met an extraordinary young woman who reminded me why life is worth fighting for." Beatrice's words touched Emily deeply. She realized that even if they weren't biologically mother and daughter, they had formed a special bond. That afternoon, Dr. Mitchell entered the room holding an envelope. His face was serious. "I have the DNA test results." Beatrice and Emily held hands, both trembling with nerves. "The test confirms with 99.9% certainty that you are mother and daughter." The silence that followed was broken by Beatrice's sobs. 20 years of searching had finally come to an end. "Hannah, my Hannah," she repeated, embracing Emily. For the young woman, the confirmation brought a mix of relief and confusion. On one hand, she finally had answers about her origins. On the other, she knew her life would never be the same. "And now?" she asked the doctor. "Now you have an important decision to make," replied Dr. Mitchell. "The tests show that Emily is a compatible kidney donor for Beatrice." The revelation struck like lightning. Emily had just found her birth mother, only to discover she could save her. "Compatible," repeated Beatrice in disbelief. "Yes, it's an almost perfect match. But," the doctor paused, "this isn't a decision to be made on emotional impulse. It's a serious surgery with risks for both of you." Emily sat down, trying to process the information. In 48 hours, her life had been turned completely upside down, and now she faced the hardest decision of her life. "I want to go through with the donation," she said without hesitation. "No," exclaimed Beatrice, "I can't accept this. I just found you. I won't risk losing you." "Mom," the words slipped naturally from Emily's lips. "You spent 20 years searching for me. Now that you've found me, you won't lose me again." Dr. Mitchell interrupted. "You have time to think. I'll explain all the procedures and risks involved. But first, Emily, you need to settle some legal and family matters." "What kind of legal matters?" "Well, technically, you're still legally the Johnsons' daughter. Your adoption, even if irregular, was formalized. And for a procedure like this, we'll need consent from your legal parents." Emily realized she'd have to face Michael and Margaret again. and this time with news that would surely devastate them. When she got home that evening, she found her parents anxiously waiting in the living room. "Well?" asked Margaret before Emily even sat down. "The test confirmed it. Beatrice is my birth mother." Margaret collapsed onto the couch, crying. Michael stood frozen, as if punched. "And now she wants you back?" he asked. "It's not like that. She understands you've been my parents for 20 years, but there's another issue." Emily explained Beatrice's medical condition and her compatibility for the donation. "You can't possibly be thinking of doing this madness," said Margaret, agitated. "It's not madness, Mom. It's saving the life of the woman who gave birth to me." "And what about us?" asked Michael. "After all we've done for you, you'd abandon us for a stranger." "You're not strangers to me. You're my parents, but she is too. And she's dying." "Emily," said Margaret, trying to steady herself, "you don't understand the risks of this surgery. What if something goes wrong? What if I do nothing and she dies? How could I live with that?" The moral dilemma was clear. Emily had been raised by Michael and Margaret, but her existence in their lives was built on a lie. Now she had the chance to save the life of the woman who brought her into the world. "Will you give me permission for the surgery?" she asked directly. Michael and Margaret exchanged glances, and Emily saw the pain in their eyes. "What if we say no?" asked Margaret. "Then I'll fight legally for permission, and our relationship will never be the same." The threat wasn't empty. Emily was determined, and her parents saw it. "Are you absolutely sure this is what you want?" asked Michael. "I am." Then we'll support your decision." The answer surprised Emily, even knowing it could be dangerous. "Because we know it's dangerous," replied Margaret, wiping her tears. "If anything happens to you because of us, we'd never forgive ourselves." In that moment, Emily realized that despite all their mistakes, Michael and Margaret truly loved her unconditionally. "Thank you," she said, hugging them both. "This means everything to me." "But we have one condition," said Michael. "What?" "We want to meet this woman. We need to talk to her before the surgery." Emily agreed. It was only fair that all three parents meet. The next day, Michael and Margaret accompanied Emily to the hospital. The meeting between them and Beatrice was tense at first, laden with 20 years of pain on both sides. "So you're the ones who raised my daughter," Beatrice said when they were introduced. "And you're the mother who abandoned her," Margaret replied defensively. "I never abandoned Hannah. She was taken from me. According to the people who came to us, she was being neglected." "That's a lie. I worked day and night to give my daughter the best." The tension in the air was palpable. Emily intervened. "Stop this. All three of you are my parents. Each of you gave me something different, but essential." She turned to Beatrice. "You gave me life and the unconditional love of a mother who never stopped searching for me." Then she faced Michael and Margaret. "And you gave me a happy childhood, an education, values, and 20 years of love and care. But we took you from your real mother," Michael said, his voice heavy with guilt. "You were deceived," Beatrice replied, surprising everyone. "You wanted a child and were manipulated by unscrupulous people." "That doesn't absolve us of guilt," Margaret said. "No, but it doesn't erase the 20 years of love you gave Hannah either." Beatrice's use of the name Hannah made Emily realize she would have to reconcile two identities: Emily, the young woman raised lovingly by the Johnsons, and Hannah, the daughter Beatrice had lost. Dr. Mitchell entered the room to discuss the surgery procedures. "The transplant can take place next week, but I want everyone to understand the risks involved." He explained the procedures in detail, the risks of infection, chances of rejection, and the long recovery process. "Will Emily have to take immunosuppressants for the rest of her life?" Michael asked. "No, only Beatrice as the recipient. Emily will need regular medical checkups, but she can live a completely normal life with just one kidney." "And the chances of success?" Margaret asked. "With their compatibility, over 90%. Over the following week, Emily divided her time between medical preparations and long conversations with Beatrice about the 20 lost years. She learned about the jobs her birth mother had worked, the sleepless nights spent searching for her, the holidays spent alone dreaming of the day they would reunite. "Do you have any siblings?" Emily asked. "No. After you disappeared, I could never bring myself to get seriously involved with anyone again. All my energy was focused on finding you. Did you ever think of giving up?" "Every day. But then I'd look at Duke." They both glanced at the dog, who remained faithfully by Beatrice's side. "How did he end up with my adoptive parents?" "Duke must have followed you when they took you, and when your parents found him, they probably thought he was just a stray. So he always knew where I was. Dogs have an incredible ability to find the ones they love. Duke spent 20 years trying to bring you back to me." The idea was touching and not entirely implausible. Duke had always been a special dog with an almost human intelligence. Michael and Margaret also began visiting Beatrice daily. Gradually, the initial hostility gave way to a mutual understanding of the pain they had all endured. "We'd like to ask for your forgiveness," Margaret said during one of these visits. "We knew something was wrong with the adoption, but we were so desperate for a child." "You brought Hannah back to me," Beatrice replied. "She's a wonderful young woman, and that was only possible because you raised her with love. But you suffered for 20 years because of us. And you gave me back a daughter who's educated, caring, and strong. Hannah is everything I dreamed she would be." The reconciliation between Emily Johnson's three fathers was a gradual but sincere process. They realized they had all been victims of a flawed system and unscrupulous people. On the eve of the surgery, Emily was nervous but determined. She had taken care of all legal matters, including a will and power of attorney for Michael and Margaret Johnson in case something went wrong. "Are you scared?" Beatrice asked. "I am. But I'm more afraid of losing you now that I've found you. What if something goes wrong with me during the surgery? Then at least I'll know I did everything in my power to save you." On the morning of the surgery, the waiting room was full. Michael, Margaret, some distant cousins of Beatrice, who had shown up after hearing the news, and even Duke, whom the hospital had allowed to stay as emotional therapy. The surgery lasted 8 hours. They were the longest 8 hours in the lives of everyone present. When Dr. Mitchell finally appeared, his face was tired but relieved. The surgery was a complete success. Both Emily and Beatrice are well and recovering. Applause and tears of relief filled the waiting room. "When can we see them?" Michael asked. "Emily should wake up in a few hours. Beatrice might take a little longer because her surgery was more complex." When Emily woke from the anesthesia, the first thing she saw was Margaret's worried face. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Tired, but okay." "And how is my birth mother?" "She hasn't woken up yet, but the doctors say everything is going perfectly." Michael stepped closer to the bed. "Emily, we want you to know something." "What, Dad?" "We're not going to compete with Beatrice for your love. There's room for all of us in your life. And we'd like to make it official," Margaret added. "How so?" "We want Beatrice to be legally recognized as your mother too. We want you to have 2 sets of parents." The proposal was unusual but perfectly fitting. Emily smiled through her tears. "You'd do that for me?" "We'd do anything for you," Michael replied. "You're our daughter, and we want you to be happy." 2 hours later, Beatrice woke up. Her first act was to ask about Emily. "She's doing well," the nurse informed her. "The kidney is functioning perfectly in her body." "Can I see her?" "In a few hours, once you're both more stable." The reunion happened the next day when they were moved to adjacent rooms. Emily was wheeled in a chair to Beatrice's room. "How are you feeling, my daughter?" "Better than I expected. And you?" "I feel reborn. Literally." Dr. Mitchell came in to perform routine checkups. "The results are exceptional. The kidney is working perfectly, with no signs of rejection." "When can we go home?" Emily asked. "You should be discharged in 3 days. Beatrice will need to stay another week for monitoring." During their recovery days in the hospital, Emily's expanded family took turns caring for her and Beatrice. Michael brought home-cooked meals, Margaret read books to them, and Beatrice's cousins shared family stories Emily had never known. You know what's the most ironic part of all this? Beatrice said one of their last days in the hospital. What? I spent 20 years looking for you in all the wrong places, and you were here in Chicago the whole time, just a few miles away. Maybe it wasn't the right time, Emily mused. Maybe we needed to live our lives apart, to truly appreciate each other when we reunited. Maybe. But now we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. When they were finally discharged, the family decided to hold a special celebration. They rented a small hall and invited all their friends and family for a rebirth party, as Beatrice liked to call it. During the celebration, Emily gave an emotional speech. A month ago, I had one family. Today, I have two families that have become one. I've learned that love doesn't shrink when it's shared. It multiplies. She looked at Michael and Margaret. You gave me everything I needed to become the person I am today. Without you, I wouldn't have had the strength or the values to make the decision to save my birth mother. Then she turned to Beatrice. And you taught me that a mother's love is unconditional and eternal. You never gave up on me, even when everyone said you should. Finally, she glanced at Duke, who was sleeping peacefully at Beatrice's feet. And you, my loyal friend, were the guardian of our hearts for 20 years. You kept our connection alive, even when we didn't know it existed. The party lasted well into the night, filled with tears of joy, hugs, and shared stories. In the months that followed, Emily's life rearranged itself in surprising ways. She kept up with her college studies, but now split her time between the Johnsons' home and a small apartment she rented near where Beatrice lived. Beatrice, now restored to health, returned to work as a seamstress and specialized in making baby clothes, a way to cope with the years she couldn't care for her own daughter. Michael and Margaret retired early and began volunteering at a shelter for abandoned children, a way to give back to society and make peace with the guilt of their irregular adoption. You know you don't have to do this because of me, right? Emily said during a Sunday lunch. We're not doing it for you, Michael replied. We're doing it for ourselves. We want to make sure other children don't go through what you did. And other mothers don't suffer like I suffered, Beatrice added. 6 months after the surgery, Emily had fully recovered and resumed all her normal activities. Inspired by her own story, she decided to switch her major from business administration to social work. I want to work with legal adoptions, she explained to the family. I want to make sure situations like ours don't happen again. On a special afternoon, Emily, Beatrice, Michael, and Margaret went to the courthouse to formalize what was already in their hearts. A unique and special family. So, officially, you now have 4 parents, the clerk joked as he registered the documents. I have the most complicated and most loving family in the world, Emily replied, laughing. That evening, they returned to Liberty Square, where it had all begun. Duke ran happily between the trees, finally free from the mission he'd carried for 20 years. Sometimes I wonder what our lives would have been like if you hadn't decided to walk Duke that night, Beatrice said. I think we would have found a way back to each other, Emily answered. Fate has a funny way of fixing its own mistakes. They sat on the same bench where Beatrice had wept alone months earlier. Now, instead of tears of sorrow, there were tears of gratitude. You know what's most amazing? Margaret, sitting beside them, said. What? You both saved each other. Emily saved your life with her kidney, and you, Beatrice, saved her soul by showing her where she came from. And you saved us both by raising such a strong, generous woman, Beatrice replied, looking at Michael and Margaret. Their conversation was interrupted by Duke, who came running back with something in his mouth, a small tennis ball someone had lost in the square. He wants to play, Emily said, laughing. Then let's play, Michael answered, standing up. We've got a lot of lost time to make up for. And there, in that square that had witnessed so much pain, an improvised but real family celebrated love's victory over all adversity. 2 years later, Emily graduated in social work and opened an NGO specializing in reuniting families separated by irregular adoptions. Beatrice became her partner in the project, using her own experience to help other mothers who had lost children. Michael and Margaret funded the NGO and became active volunteers, working to ensure other families wouldn't go through the same mistakes they had made. In 5 years of operation, The NGO Heart Connections had reunited 43 families and helped regularize hundreds of irregular adoptions. "You turned our tragedy into hope for others," said a father who had found his son after 15 years of separation. "We just passed on what we learned," Emily replied. "That love always finds its way back home." During the NGO's 5-year anniversary ceremony, Emily gave her final public speech about her personal story. "5 years ago, I was a college student who thought she knew her own story. Today, I know the most important stories are the ones we're still writing." She looked at her family in the audience: Beatrice, now 70 and in perfect health; Michael and Margaret, who had become adoptive grandparents to several children from the shelter where they worked; and Duke, now old, but still a loyal companion. "I learned that family isn't just who gives birth to us or raises us. Family is who chooses to stay with us, even when the truth is hard to accept." After the event, the family gathered at home for a special dinner. Beatrice had prepared Emily's favorite dish, a stew she used to make for Hannah as a baby and had taught Margaret to cook. "It's funny how some things come back to us," Beatrice said as she served the dish. "This stew was the first solid food you ever ate. And now it's the food that reminds me most of home," Emily replied. "Which home?" Michael teased. "All of them, because now they're all one." That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Emily took Duke for one last walk through Liberty Square. The dog, even at 15, still insisted on their nightly routine. Sitting on the bench where it all began, she reflected on how her life had completely changed. From a confused young woman without an identity, she had become a woman certain of her purpose and surrounded by love. Duke approached and rested his head on her lap, as he had done since he was a puppy. "Thank you, my friend," she whispered, stroking his ears. "Thank you for bringing me back home." The dog looked at her with wise eyes, as if he understood the weight of those words perfectly. When they got home, Emily found a surprise. Beatrice, Michael, and Margaret were in the living room, organizing photo albums. "What are you all doing awake at this hour?" "We're putting together the official family album," Margaret explained. "We want to gather all the pictures from when you were a baby until now." "So the grandchildren will know the whole story," Beatrice added with a smile. "Grandchildren?" Emily repeated, laughing. "Are you already planning my future?" "A family like ours deserves to keep growing," Michael said. Emily joined them in sorting through the photos. There were pictures of her childhood with Michael and Margaret, photos of Beatrice alone over the years keeping hope alive, and now hundreds of pictures of the reunited family. "You know what we should do?" Emily suddenly said. "What?" "We should write our story, a book about our family, to show that happy endings exist even in the most complicated situations." "And who would write it?" "All of us, each telling our part of the story." The idea was met with enthusiasm. They spent the rest of the night planning how to structure the book, which chapters each would write, and how to use their story to inspire other families. "How do you think we should end the book?" asked Beatrice. Emily looked at the 3 people she loved most in the world, then at Duke sleeping peacefully on the rug, and finally at the photos scattered across the table, visual proof of an incredible journey of pain, loss, reunion, and love. "I think we should end it exactly where we are now," she said, "a complicated, unlikely, but real family planning to write their story for the world, because our story proves that love always finds a way, even when that path takes 20 years of separation." "And don't forget Duke," added Michael. "He's the silent hero of this whole story." "Duke will have his own chapter," Emily promised. "The dog who never gave up on reuniting his family." In the early hours of the morning, as they sorted through photos and planned the future, they realized they had created something unique, a family that had overcome lies, separation, and pain to find a love deeper and truer than any of them had ever imagined possible. And so, in the same square where a dog had once barked desperately at a lonely woman, a new story was being written, not of an ending, but of a beginning. The beginning of a family that proved true love knows no barriers of time, blood, or circumstance. Duke, even in sleep, seemed to smile. His mission was complete. He had brought his family back home. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this incredible story of reunion and resilience. Do you believe a family's love can overcome any obstacle? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.